Hello, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us for what I think you will find to be an extremely important conversation. I apologize for the delay, but we had some technical hiccups here in the Senate. Today we're going to be joined by Mr. Arif Husain, who is the chief economist of the World Food Program, an agency of the United Nations. And what we're going to be discussing is an issue that the whole world is watching, and that is the humanitarian disaster currently taking place in Gaza. But before I get to Mr. Husain, I want to give a little bit of background as to what's going on and my feelings about it. I think we all know that on October 7th, Hamas, a terrorist organization, launched a terrible and horrific attack against Israel, killing 1,200 innocent men, women, and children, taking over 200 hostages. Over 100 of those hostages remain in captivity today. And my view from the very beginning was that Israel had a right to respond to Hamas. But what has clearly happened, at least to my view, is that Israel has not simply responded militarily to Hamas, they've gone to war against the Palestinian people. And the results of that have been horrible. We are looking at over 25,000 Palestinians dead, 2/3 of whom are women and children, some 60,000 who have been wounded, many of them are children. You're talking about 70% of the housing units in Gaza either damaged or destroyed. We're talking about 1.9 million people displaced, driven out of their homes. Many of them are very poor people, now living in United Nations facilities without adequate food, water, medical supplies, fuel. And that is the situation where we're in right now. Mr. Husain is an economist, as I said, with the chief economist with the World Food Program, and their job, and they do an extraordinary job in that, is to provide relief to some of the most desperate and hungry people throughout the world. So we are delighted that Arif Husain is with us today, chief economist, World Food Program. Mr. Husain, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Senator, for inviting me. It's really an honor to be here with you.
Why don't we just jump right into it? We have seen reports coming out of the UN and other food agencies talking about the incredible humanitarian disaster now taking place in Gaza. Could you describe what you know to be the case?
Well, Senator, you said it. Just to give a little bit of background on my side, I've been doing this for about 20 years now. My first crisis was Darfur back in 2003 in Sudan. And I've been to places from South Sudan to Yemen to Syria to Lebanon to Sudan to pretty much everywhere there has been a disaster, Afghanistan. I've been there. And in my opinion, this crisis is unprecedented. And I don't say that lightly because, three things in my head make this unprecedented. One is the scale, meaning pretty much everybody, 2.2 million people, experiencing crisis level of hunger. The second part is severity. In the sense of severity, basically, like I said, almost everybody pretty much hungry. 26%, meaning 500,000 people literally starving. You said, 25,000 plus dead, 60,000 plus injured, infrastructure destroyed, more than half of the place, and then massive displacements. And it's not only about food then also. It's shortage of water, it's shortage of medicine, it's shortage of shelter, it is shortage of healthcare. And it is happening in a time when it's winter time, it's raining, all of that is happening as well. So when you put it all of this together, it shows you the severity of the situation, basically. And for me, the third part of this is the speed at which it has happened. Within less than 100 days, people who were doing reasonably well in many ways are suddenly destitute, basically, on so many levels. And basically, the other thing which is extremely troubling in this crisis and what makes it unprecedented is what is going to come next. You have a situation where we are one step away from a disease outbreak because all the recipe is there. You know, million people living in shelters in very congested space. You know, WHO came up with numbers like, 4,500 people for one shower, 220 people for one toilet. What that means is that we are looking at a disease outbreak very quickly. And that happening at a time when people's immune systems, especially the young and the elderly, are severely weakened. Why? Because frankly, they haven't had food. Frankly, they haven't had water. Frankly, they don't have enough access to medicine. And so when you combine weakened immune systems with disease outbreak, worse is yet to come. That would be that's where the logic will take you. And one other thing which is important is that this is not just World Food Program which is saying this. This is not just one person saying this. This analysis on the food security side, which we do, which is called the IPC Integrated Phase Classification Analysis, basically. This is done by 17 different entities, 17 different partners, both UN and non-UN. There were about 30 analysts which looked at all of this data to come up with the conclusions which I mentioned. So it is something which is happening in real time. It's out there for us to see. And if we don't do anything about this or do something very quickly, this can even get worse than what it is, and it is already horrific.
Let me ask you, I think I know the answer, but I want to make sure that our viewers understand it as well. What is the logistics of preventing food and water getting in? There is a whole lot of your agency, other agencies are prepared to supply food. Water is theoretically available. Why is it not getting to the people who are in such desperation?
Sir, there are, people need a little bit background on this also, because on a good day, before October 7th, about 75 to 80% of the population relied on humanitarian assistance from outside. And about 2/3 of the population relied on food assistance from outside, which meant that not enough is produced in Gaza. It comes from outside. This is why you've heard the 500 trucks per day, 600 trucks per day coming before. And hence also there are no like sitting stocks on which we could say, it's already existing over there, people can use that, right? So when the supplies stopped, or they were not coming, or they are not coming at the level that they needed to come at, suddenly there is a shortage, right? And what we are seeing is that there is about, in terms of what is coming in, that is not more than 20 to 30%. Why? Because there are only 2 border crossings which are working at this moment. And the processing of what is coming in takes quite a bit of time as well. So that creates the issue of what is coming in or whether enough is coming in, right? And then the second issue is that even if it is coming in, it needs to be distributed. And it needs to go to people where they are if people cannot come to where the food is and where the other essentials are. That means you need safety and security for our people who are going to be delivering it and for people who are going to be receiving it. And if that doesn't exist, food can come to the border, but it's going to be very, very tough to actually for that to go forward. So the second thing is safety and security of people, but also of the humanitarians. As UN, we have lost 152 so far humanitarian workers. So the third thing is that we need essentials like fuel, like electricity, and basically gas also. Why? Because our trucks need to move with all those commodities. We need to have that bread production going at a larger scale so people can have access to that. And we need the communication networks, even for ourselves, to be working. And then sort of the fourth thing, which is important, is basically that humanitarian can only do so much. You need if you are going to be doing things at scale and in a sustainable way, then commercial has to work. The private sector has to work. And for all of these things which I've mentioned, for them to work, the necessary condition is a humanitarian ceasefire. Because if there is no ceasefire, you don't have safe access. You don't have private sector coming. You don't have the other essentials which we need. And when you don't have those, that puts people at jeopardy because they are being deprived of very essential things like food, water, and medicine.
Let me ask you this. In addition, and I agree with everything you said, but in addition to that, the dangers that truck drivers face, that people face in getting food, there is also a blockage at the border as well. There's a backup.
Yes.
It takes forever. Can you say a word about the quote-unquote inspections that Israel
Yes,
is
so
imposing on this process?
Yes, Senator. So that's, I called it the processing, right? So if processing takes a long time, if trucks have to be loaded and reloaded and rejected because there was one item which was not on the list, that kind of stuff, what it is doing is it is taking time. And a truck standing on the border and not getting to where it needs to be with the commodities on it, which people need, is as good as if it's not there.
Right.
And I think that is, Senator, in terms of, imports coming in, it is about the number of border crossings, and it is about the processing when the commodities come on the border, how quickly they can be disposed,
So
how quickly they can move in country.
Mr. Husain, as I understand it, before October 7th, there were about 500 trucks a day getting in.
That's correct.
Now, in the midst of incredible desperation, a situation far worse than before October 7th, how many trucks in the last week or so do you think have gotten through?
So up and down, but let me just say that not more than 20 to 30% of the need is coming in. Okay. So, that's some days the maximum I've heard is about 130 trucks, but maybe it's more because I don't know exactly how many. But on averages, it's not more than 20 to 30% of what is needed actually coming into the strip.
All right. When we talk about reality in Gaza right now, I think especially about the vulnerability of the children and the elderly, as you mentioned.
Yes.
But I should think that if I am a 3-year-old or a 5-year-old, what I am going through right now is unspeakable. In terms of the destruction that I'm seeing, the death that I'm seeing, that I've been pushed out of my home. I'm living in very bad conditions. I don't have access to water. The damage, psychic and physical, that the children are experiencing must be quite awful. Am I missing something there?
No, sir. No, absolutely not. It's the trauma. And trauma, children out of school, looking at all this happening to their communities and not understanding why.
Right.
This doesn't go away the next day. It scars you. And wherever it has happened, populations have been scarred because of that. And it is very hard to forget that.
I know.
And I think, Senator, the day after people talk about rebuilding and people going back to the communities, I also talk about the trauma and dealing with the trauma of what has happened.
All right, I want to ask you, and I agree with you. I mean, I think there is sometimes people think, oh, at some point the war will end, people will return, everything will be happy ever after. I mean, these folks have undergone enormous psychic trauma.
That's right.
Talk a little bit, go into a little bit more depth about your agency and others have talked about hunger, looming, starvation, famine.
Yes.
Go into that a little bit if you could.
Yes, sir. So famine is for analysts like me, famine is a technical term. What that means is that when we say there is a famine, that essentially means that for in any given place, three conditions must come together, okay? Number one, at least 20% of the people in that particular place must be facing extreme levels of hunger, basically starving.
All right, what is, I know you're an economist, but put this into terms that people can understand. What does that mean,
Right.
Extreme? You know, everybody gets hungry in America, right? You skip a meal,
When you get a place where you haven't eaten for 24 hours, you're skipping meals to feed your children. You're basically, in a month you haven't eaten for 10 days, 24 hours periods each time. You start to feel weak. You start to feel vulnerable. That is the starvation level of hunger. So this is not by, oh, I'm on a diet. No, this is not a diet. This is like you will eat anything type of situation or getting to that. This is why it is a criteria of famine, yeah? Or because it's the 20% or at least 20%. That's the first condition, sir. And that, in case of Gaza, is already because 26% of people are in that state as we speak, more than 500,000, so that condition is already met. That's one. The second condition, sir, relates to children under 5. And what we say is that in that particular place, 30% of the children must be wasted.
That's a terrible term. I must say that is a terrible term. I know it's used.
That is, but it's a technical term. What that means is that for your height, you don't have enough weight. So, you see the bones, you start to see the ribs and you see edema and you see all of that kind of stuff. So it's severely malnourished, right? That's the second condition.
And are we seeing that right now, or will we see it? What is your sense?
We are, I will tell you, sir, the experts who have been looking at this, they're saying that if this crisis continues as it is or it worsens, we will be there within the next 6 months. Exactly when, don't know yet. But that's only the second condition. So the third condition is that the mortality rate, meaning the death rate, should double, meaning instead of 1 per 10,000 per day, it should be 2 or more per 10,000 per day for adults, and from 2 per 10,000 per day for children, which is average, to 4 per 10,000 per day for children. And mind you, this is not trauma-related mortality. This is non-trauma-related mortality. So just imagine, sir, that when we call it a famine, we are saying people must be starving, children must be wasted, and many more people must have died because of hunger-related causes.
And I think, Mr. Husain, as you pointed out, what we're not looking at one issue, we're looking at a cumulative set of issues, each compounding each other. We talked about food, the water situation there is pretty disastrous as well. Can you say a word about water?
Yes, sir. So on the water side, in our world, we talk about severe standards. That's another term, basically. Basically, what it means is that you and I, we need at least 15 liters of water, a little over 3 gallons of water per day for all our uses, at least minimum, at the minimum. Right now in Gaza, you are lucky if you have 1 to 2 liters of water, which is less than half a gallon for all your needs.
All your needs. That's include
All your needs.
washing
right?
and drinking and everything.
Washing, brushing your teeth, to drinking, to all of that. And you're lucky if you get that. So this is what I'm saying, that, going forward, looking forward, when you put all of this together, there is I will tell you that, when we do these type of analysis and the situation is really this bad, we deploy something which is called the FRC, Famine Review Committee. Okay. And what that is essentially like 5 experts in their fields from let's say, from nutrition, from food security, from health. They come together and they actually look at the data. And their job is to say, okay, you know what, is it a famine situation or could it become a famine situation? And when I say that, we can expect a famine within the next 6 months if things continue the way they are or they worsen, this is not my conclusion. This is their conclusion. And these are folks whose day job is to analyze data on things like health, nutrition, and all of that.
All right, let me jump in and ask you this. We've talked about, I want to get back to the water situation. It's not only the lack of an adequate supply of water for people, it's the quality of the water. Can you say a word on what kind of, there's not an ample supply of clean drinking water, I should think.
Sir, the problem is that if you have left your homes and you're displaced and you're living in shelters, which are like they're just incredibly crowded. It's not like you have facilities, right? You don't have your kitchens and you don't have your access to market. Okay, let me go buy a bottle of water or let me boil the water which I got. So what are people living in? What are people drinking? It's called the brackish water. It's the dirty water, which that's all they got, right? So you combine that. I mean, this is why you've seen, this is what I was talking about, the risk of disease outbreaks. These are the things which contribute to that. And then you look at, okay, no food, no water, no medicine. Are people going to die from this? Of course.
All right, you mentioned
they won't die of hunger, they will die of disease.
We have talked about the humanitarian crisis in terms of the long-standing aid that has come into Gaza not being able to get there. Talk about, and you mentioned the private sector right now, so if I want to go to a store and buy some fruits or vegetables or rice, what's available to me right now?
Not much, and frankly, whatever is available, you cannot afford.
Talk about that for a moment. So how much does it cost me to buy a loaf of bread or an apple or vegetables?
It is, all I can tell you is that, prices are exponentially higher if it is available. But Senator, the other issue is, can you get to the market? Can you leave to go to the market? And who's going to stock the market? And where are you going to get the monies, even from outside? Remittances cannot come in this kind of environment, right? So who's going to bring the money for you to have the purchasing power to actually buy stuff? And for us, I mean, when we say, we need a humanitarian ceasefire and we need things to start working, the commercial sector to work, that means stocking of the markets, but it also means helping people, now not with food maybe, but with cash. So they can go, but that will only work if there is the safety and security of people to actually get to the markets, and private sector and others will only come if they know that they can do business without getting killed.
Mr. Husain, say a word, if you might, about the healthcare situation. So you got people dealing with hunger, injuries. There is probably an enormous need for healthcare in Gaza right now. What is available to the average person there?
Again, sir, not much. There is some healthcare coming in, like vaccines and stuff, but nothing at the level that it is needed. There's been talk of medical packages and things like that, but not in sufficient quantities. And again, sir, I mean, let me ask you, I mean, if you cannot go to your clinic, if you cannot go to your hospital, if those things are destroyed, or you can simply not access them, I mean, everything else doesn't really matter then, does it?
Right. And my understanding is, correct me if I'm wrong here, that most of the healthcare facilities, hospitals, have either been damaged or destroyed, or people just can't access them. Is that the case?
Yes, sir. And that's what WHO tells us, right? And that's what the numbers tell us. Senator, there is another thing which is very important, is that we live in times of technology. So it is very hard to exaggerate in a way. Why? Because if you wanted to see what is the level of destruction, you don't have to ask me. You can analyze the satellite imagery and see how things have changed. If you want to see, how agricultural production is affected in Gaza Strip, you can use the satellite imageries to actually see that. If you wanted to see how many people are displaced, you can see the new camps. So it is really, what I'm saying, this is out there for everybody to see. And this is also what makes this different. Back in 20 years ago in Darfur, for me, a perfectly good answer was, it's a no-go area, meaning we cannot go in, so we don't really know what's happening over there. Today, there are not many no-go areas. What I mean by that is, if we cannot put feet on the ground or boots on the ground, we can use the cell phones. If we cannot use the cell phones, we can use the satellites. But one way or the other, we will get the information out. And that information is available for everybody to see. So it is not an issue of saying, oh, you know what, this is exaggerated or this is not, because you can see it. And that is unique. But it is unique, but it also increases the burden of responsibility on us, because this is happening under our watch, and this is happening, which we cannot say, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know this was happening. Well, we know.
You mentioned a few moments ago about the need for a humanitarian ceasefire.
Yes.
What would that look like? What would that mean for the people of Gaza?
So we need a ceasefire so people can go back. But we need more than just a ceasefire. We need immediate assistance at massive scale, at sustained scale.
All right, let me ask you this. Let me interrupt you and ask you this. If there was a humanitarian ceasefire tomorrow, could we bring in a sufficient amount of aid to address this crisis? Is it there, ready to go, if the conditions allowed it to proceed?
So there is always two things which must come together if you're going to have a good humanitarian operation. One, you need access, right? You need physical access. You need to get to people wherever there may be. That's one. And then the second one is you need resources. You can have all the access but no resources, it doesn't work.
Right.
You can have all the resources but no access, it still doesn't work. But when these two things come together, we can avert famines. People don't have to die of hunger and disease in 21st century under our watch if we have these two things.
So I'm hearing you saying that if there was a humanitarian ceasefire, we have the capability then of getting sufficient aid to save children and the people of Gaza. Is that what I'm hearing from you?
Absolutely, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
This is not an insurmountable problem. That the problem is?
No,
Okay.
no, we have seen bad crises before. We have saved lives. Maybe not at this speed and at this scale, and it's not at this severity, but we are equipped to deal with these things, whether it is natural disasters or whether it's conflicts. So we received the Nobel Peace Prize back in 2020 for our work in conflict environments. And it's not just World Food Program, it is the entire system which needs to come in and play its part. And if we do that together, people don't have to die unnecessarily out of hunger and disease.
Mr. Husain, we have covered a lot of territory. What did we not discuss that you think it's important for people to know?
As a humanitarian, sir, and as a person, as an analyst, like you said in the start, I really believe that women and children should never be hurt by, for any reason, by anyone in any place. That was wrong on October 7th, and it is wrong today. That was wrong in Israel, that is wrong in Gaza and elsewhere. We need to protect the innocent wherever they are. And I think that's, and when we don't, humanity hurts, our humanity hurts. And I think that, to me, is the very personal and very important, that no child, no elderly, no women should ever be hurt like they have been.
Well, I know I speak for not only people throughout the United States, but people throughout the world in thanking the World Food Program and the other very brave UN providers. And I think, as you mentioned, what, 150 UN personnel have been killed already?
Plus, yes, sir.
That's an extraordinary number, is it not?
Yes, sir. This is the highest number of UN staff who have lost their or given their lives for a single crisis ever.
Well, let me just express my gratitude to the World Food Program and the other UN agencies for making this extraordinary effort. And I certainly share your view that we have got to bring a humanitarian ceasefire as quickly as possible. You know, and the point that you made, the world is watching. This is not happening in some hidden part of the world. Everybody knows.
It's not in a vacuum.
Right, everybody knows what's going on, and we cannot turn a blind eye to this terrible, terrible suffering. It diminishes all of us as human beings, and it lowers the bar to what human beings are if we allow this suffering to continue. So with that, let me just thank you so much, Mr. Husain, for what you're doing.
Thank you, sir.
And again, thanks to the World Food Program for all of their efforts. Okay.
And Senator, thank you for your voice in all of this. It's very much appreciated by all of us. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. Okay, everybody. Thank you very much. Take care.